Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This time around we're looking at the Hobbyeagle A3 Super 4 6-axis gyro. So before we unbox this, first things first, this is incredibly cheap for what it is. I'm gonna get out there and say it. The last gyro I reviewed or had a look at was the Gyro A3 from Futaba, which is £150. Yeah, this claims to have pretty much all the same functionality, all the functionality you need anyway, and it's only £22. That's right, you can buy 6 of these for the price of one Futaba gyro. So I'm really keen to get this unboxed, get it set up, see how difficult it's set up, and get flying with it. So in this video, we're going to do the configuration of this gyro, set it up, put it in a plane, and make sure it all works. Okay, so let's have a look at what's in the box. So it is Hobbyeagle A3 Super 4. Pretty standard stuff. You have a data connection at one end. That's better, data connection there. And then you have outputs, which will go to each of your different servos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then at the top, you have the inputs, if you like, which come directly from the receiver. Now, at first glance, that looks a little bit confusing. How's it in focus? There we go. Looks a little bit confusing. A2, E2, G, A, E, R. I believe that's aileron, elevator, rudder. Then you have another port there, serial, RX, and M. So this gyro does support a lot of different receivers. I'll bring up the manual shortly and show you that. But lots of different types. This time around we are going to be using it with a Futaba receiver, and I'll tell you what the receiver number is shortly. But let's get on and have a look what's in the box. Okay, it's a standard data cable. That's a USB cable. A card with a QR code for the manual. Some wires. And these look a bit interesting. And I'll tell you why. Come, just before I do that, just 2 sticky pads which we use to mount the gyro. I need one. Yes, that's what I thought. So, odd connection there. So you have normal on one end, kind of servo, really out of focus, and the other end is just splitting 3 wires off to 3 separate connections. So I'm presuming, well I know actually, these will go into your receiver, and you use one end to go into the gyro, which don't be concerned about, that's absolutely fine. And we've got another one of those here as well, and then we've got a straight through cable. So you can, and again, we're going to get into the configuration in a minute, but just to clarify what these are about, you can use an S-bus lead and go from this gyro single cable to receiver to S-bus, or you can use these funky leads, which they've also provided, which go into each individual channel, aileron, aileron 2, elevator, elevator 2, rudder, and I can't remember what the other one is, but we'll work that out. So either one or the other. So I'll bring up the spec sheet in a minute as to what is supported, but that's a good start. Well, I like it, it's just different. And then we have this odd device. So that's a USB, it's like a USB adapter. I can never get this to focus. There we go, USB adapter for the data cable. So that's allowing you to plug it in case you haven't got the smaller USB ends. And in there as well is this really odd connector here as well. I'm not 100% sure at this stage just what that is, but I'll make sure I work that out for you before we get to the end of this video. So next up, I'm going to throw up the manual on the screen and highlight a few important bits for you. And I'm going to put a link to this manual and the gyro and anything else I reference into the description of this video for you. So onto the manual. So nicely provided in PDF as per normal. A few important notes to read. Okay, planes aren't toys, thank you for that. Couple of next two are important though. So after power on, the gyro needs to perform an accurate gyroscope calibration, basically. So basically, if you've not used a gyro before, Once it's all configured and you turn your plane on, you'll find nothing happens for at least a couple of seconds. Don't move the sticks on the transmitter, just leave it. And what that is the gyro initializing itself and doing some configuration. So the sticks must be center, throttle stick must be down, leave it on, and you'll probably see all the control surfaces twitch slightly. And again, I'll show you that once we've got it plugged in. So leave it to do its thing, and then you'll probably hear a beep and it'll come on and it'll be absolutely fine. So don't panic, but it's really important at this stage that the plane is level. It's sat on the floor and it's level, and you're not holding it or waving it about, because if you do that, the gyro won't be able to calibrate. That's basically what those warnings mean. So let's scroll down a little bit further. So next important thing, and you're going to see me do this, is the mounting direction. You probably saw just a minute ago, the gyro has an arrow at the front. That arrow must point towards the front of the aircraft. Okay, it doesn't matter which orientation the gyro is in, whether it's on its side, sitting upright, if you like, on the opposite side, or even upside down, but the arrow must always point forward. If you point this arrow any other direction, your gyro is just not going to work properly. You're not going to get the desired result, and the good chance is if you try flying it like it, turn the gyro on, you will probably crash. So number one tip, installation is important. It has got to point in the right direction. But another tip for you, if you've mounted it on either side or upside down, still pointing forwards, you'll need to change some configuration on it to tell it it's on its side, or it's upside down, or on the other side, so on and so forth. So I'll cover that for you as well. Let's move on a bit further. So mounting is important. Now they've supplied some really good instructions in this manual. I was pretty impressed when I read through it earlier on. First of all, for different types of receiver. So it supports PWM protocol. It supports a single line receiver, so S-bus in other words, and also supports Spectrum receivers and Spectrum SRXL2 receiver. I pointed that one out as well. So it's good that it supports lots of different things. On our configuration, I'm actually going to use the provided cables. I'm not going to use an S-bus connection in there. Actually, I'm not even sure if the receiver that I'm going into supports S-bus or S-bus 2 rather. So we should use what is provided in the box, which probably means you can use it for a wider variety of receivers. So it'd be nice to be able to use some of the cheaper receivers rather than some of those high-end expensive ones, which sometimes you're forced to do when you use a gyro. So we'll be going through this and doing the wiring, and I'll explain to you what wiring we're using. And then it provides a whole bunch of really confusing table about what channels what, depending on what receiver you're using. Worth noting it's in there. I'll let you know what we use when I get that far. Talks about satellite receivers, output functions, a note about servo reverse, note about wing type as well. So basically you have to tell the gyro what type of wing you're flying. From a traditional standard wing with the two ailerons in it, which can be on two aileron channels, aileron channel 1 and aileron channel 2, or just Y lead into one, or you might just have one servo, that's absolutely fine. In that configuration as well, you've got standard elevator and also standard rudder. Again, you can have two servos on the elevator if you want to, it supports that. And it supports two servos on the aileron as well, if you're using that. Don't worry if you're not, that's also supported. It also supports a delta wing, which is where you don't have a tailplane, you have the delta shaped wing, and therefore your ailerons are also doing your elevator controls at the same time. That is also supported, and also a V-tail as well. Better show you the diagram rather than my hands, but where you've got the V-tail action, so you've not got a rudder or a normal horizontal stabilizer, you've just got a V, and that's where you're doing the rudder and elevator movements off of the V-tail. So all that's supported, so you should pretty much be good to go. One thing I've noticed is not supported, this isn't a heli gyro. It says that clearly on the box. I've not done any further research to see whether you can make this work in a helicopter. I'm not a heli guy, you may have noticed that if you're a subscriber. One more thing I will point out, and that's the flight modes. So this is good to know. So if you're new to gyros, it's not just a case of you put the gyro in the plane, you set it all up and the gyro's always on. You've got a whole bunch of different flight modes. First of all, you can turn the gyro off, and you can configure these flight modes back to a switch on your transmitter. So I normally do it so by default, when the switch is down or away from you, the gyro is completely off. So that's just like normal flying. So your plane should just fly like it always does. And then you've got normal mode, which is gyro activated. So it's doing some levering and some correction for you. Great for windy conditions. It should sort of smooth out the flight for you rather than getting bumped around. So if the wing drops, it will just straighten it back up automatically for you. You've then got something called a lock mode, which is a bit like a heading hold mode, or sometimes they call that the AVCS mode. And what the lock mode basically is once it's activated and you put the sticks in a certain position, if you let go, it will keep the model in that position. So you may have seen before, I've got a video on my channel, I believe, where I've just thrown a model into knife edge, slow knife edge pass, got it how I wanted it, got the right amount of rudder in, a little bit of elevator, right amount of throttle, then I've put it onto lock mode, and I've let go of the sticks, and the model will just stay there, knife edging, pass. I don't really know why you'd want to use that, other than just to see if it works. Let me know in the comments below if you've got another idea for that. So that's lock mode. And then you've got angle mode, which I think is pretty cool as well. And this used to be called the trainer mode. So angle mode will stop the aircraft rotating past a certain point. So you can't do a roll. No matter how hard you try, if you're angle mode enabled, you put full ailerons on, it's not going to do a roll, it's not going to do a barrel roll, it's just going to bank. It's going to bank and it's going to stop there. Same, you can't do a loop on trainer mode or lock mode. It's not called lock mode, is it? Level mode. You can't do a loop either. You pull back the elevator, it'll climb, but it won't go right back on its back and do that loop. So it's really used to be called trainer mode. Now they call it level. They call it angle mode. Getting my modes mixed up already, which is probably confusing you, which is why, again, I've linked to the instructions below. Lock mode is the knife edge example. Angle mode is to stop it rolling over. And then you've got level mode, which is different again. So level mode, I guess it's kind of like a fail safe. If you're in a certain position, you've kind of like lost it, the model's rolled over, hit level mode, it will straighten things back up and keep you level. So I'm quite interested to test that later on. So it's also known as the auto level mode or auto balance mode or horizon mode. Now what doesn't help is we've got lots of different names for the same thing. I guess that's because different standards or different manufacturers use different names and they're trying to accommodate all of that for you. So if you're not familiar with what level mode is, you might know auto level, auto balance or horizon. They're all the same thing. Slightly different from the angle mode because there's no maximum angle. So a maximum angle mode will stop you rolling over. This one will roll over, be hit level and it'll stay level. Then you've got hover mode, which could be really interesting. Also known as the auto hover mode, provides the same functionality as the level mode. The only difference is that when you release the sticks, the airplane will be brought to a vertical position, nose up, and keeps hovering. You thinking what I'm thinking? That's cheating. That is absolutely cheating. That's basically prop hang on a button for you. Now I'm kind of tempted to buy one of these myself just to try this. By the way, this isn't mine, this is a friend of mine, Barry, who I met through the channel. He's asked me to take a look at this and set up in the model, which is what we're doing today. I'm kind of tempted to get hold of one myself just to try that cheaty prop mode, also known as hover mode, in my plane. That'd be quite cool when it come along, look super low, but is it cheating? I don't know. If you think that's cheating, let me know in the comments below. If you think, who cares? Let me know as well. And then we've got a user mode where you can set up your own mode. So if all those 6 modes weren't enough with their multiple different names for you, if you're not confused already, you can go and configure your own one. We're gonna keep it simple, guys. We're gonna have gyro off, gyro on, and then we're gonna have level mode. Okay, so just 3 modes in this video. If you want to find out the others and you want to see how to configure them, or you want to see them flying and being demonstrated, again, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to do another video for you. But this one is just about setup, setting those 3 going, wiring it in, and then just testing it here in the workshop. So let's crack on with that, shall we? Okay, so moving on to the plane that we're going to use and also the transmitter for this. First of all, we're going to be setting this up on the T16IZ, which is a Futaba transmitter, but again, shouldn't make any difference as to what radio you're using because this is a generic gyro. And then the plane, well, let me show you. And there she is. Yes, she is a foamy. So this is the Avios, I believe I said that right. Yes, the Avios Tundra. Yeah, there we go. Avios is there, and it's a Tundra. Dun, dun, dun. Oh no, it's a Grand Tundra. Anyway, it's the plane that gyro is going in. So this is a 4S setup, but can go up to 6S, and it has flaps. So we've got to make sure our flaps work after we put the gyro in. Obviously the flaps will not be running through the gyro. And it has ailerons running on 2 separate servos, elevator, and of course the rudder there, and it is an electric setup. Apparently it's a lot of fun, this plane. I've not flown it. Again, it is my friend's Barry, but this is what we're going to be throwing the gyro in today. So let's have a look at what's inside. Or actually, before we do that, I should say the starting point for this model is already set up on the transmitter. So on the Futaba, everything is currently working, but obviously the gyro's not in there. So that's our starting position. Let me show you inside. Okay, so the receiver is out, and as you can see, pretty much every single port, all but one, is connected at the moment. Nicely though, we have got labels on these. If you're in the same position here and you haven't got labels, just a quick little trick you can do, we can definitely do on the Futaba one anyway, is you can go into the linkage menu and you go into function, and you can actually see what's plugged into each channel. So aileron is on channel 1, and that corresponds to number 1 on the receiver, elevator, throttle, rudder, so on and so forth. Check the second page if you need to. So that's just a nice little way of checking what's plugged in there, because that's going to be really relevant for us now we're going to come to plug in the gyro. So this may look like a daunting task, and it does to me a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the relevant wires from the receiver and plug them into the right outputs, which is the bottom 5 here. So don't worry about any inputs, just do what's already plugged in to the outputs. Now I know that number 1 is aileron, so aileron goes into output 1 here, and you also see here it tells you what the positive and negative and the signal wire is as well. So let's plug the aileron in. That will drop in the gyro. Unplug first. And I'm not going to worry about how messy my wires are. I'm going to do all the tidying up right at the end, and I encourage you to do the same thing too. So that should go in like so. So aileron 1 into output 1. Now in output 2 we need the elevator servo. So again, this is all in the instructions. Now as it happens, the elevator servo on this receiver is also in channel 2. Fingers and thumbs at the moment. So if we unplug channel 2, we'll check the label. Yes, it does say elevator. Again, plug that in. This is a different coloured wire, but I know that the yellow is the signal, so that will go this way around. Make sure that's a nice tight fit in there. Don't want that coming loose. And now we're on to number 3. And 3 is the rudder servo, so that's the rudder output. Now the rudder output on here isn't 3. 3 is the throttle on this one, and of course the throttle is going to stay wired directly to the receiver. You don't wire the throttle through the gyro, there's no need for it. You're not stabilising the throttle. So 4 is the next one, which is the rudder. Again, trying to get in here. And I'm going to flick that over and put that into output 3. So ailerons, elevator, rudder. So let's now get the gyro connected to the receiver. And we're going to do that by using one of these leads. Now these look like a normal servo wire, except on the end they have 3 connections. So what we're basically doing is, I believe, we're separating out the 3 different signals from the receiver into the gyro for those channels. Kind of makes sense? I hope so. So this wire goes into AER. Can you see that? I think you can. I'll zoom in. AER, that stands for aileron, elevator, rudder. Now if you did have, or if you do have 2 aileron servos or 2 elevator servos, then we'd have to put another one of these wires into the top port and then just wire the correct colour into the corresponding one you're using. So for example, if you had 2 aileron servos, we'd put one of these in the top port and just wire one wire into the corresponding hole on the receiver. So let's wire this in here. So that goes into the middle port. Okay, you don't want to force it, but you want to make sure it's in there nicely. So at this stage, to recap, again, trying to take this slow, all we've done so far is we've got the servos going into the gyro for the ones that we want to stabilise, ailerons, elevator, rudder, and now we want to connect the gyro back into the right ports in the receiver. I've not changed anything on the transmitter right now, so we need to work out what colour goes into which of those 3 that I removed, channel 1, 2 and 4. So again, we can do that by referring to the manual, and the manual tells us that orange wire is aileron, red wire is elevator, and the brown wire is indeed the rudder. So if we go for aileron first, being orange, which we knew was channel 1. Again, it's a signal wire, so make sure it's facing the right way up. It's always harder to plug these things in when you're recording. There you go. And then we want the elevator, just double check, is red. Slot that in the middle. And the last one, to replace the 3 that we've removed, is of course the brown wire. And again, it's a signal wire that's only going in there, which is why I've only got 1 wire. And there we go. So we've got the same amount of holes filled back up. We've just actually got the servos going in here. Okay guys, so I've just missed a wire. Okay, so I've showed it all wired up, but I didn't connect. I turned it all on and realised it wasn't working. And the reason why it wasn't working is the gyro didn't have any power going to it. So you stop and think about it, all we've done is plugged the outputs in, which go to the servos, and then the wire we plugged in initially, so unplug that one, was this signal wire for the aileron, elevator and rudder. We know it's signal wire because it splits in 3, it goes in 3 separate ports, so there's no power going to gyro, so there's nothing transmitting power. Okay, we've got outputs and only 1 input. Now you can't plug power into the AER or the A2, well, there's top 1, E2 and G. That's not for power. I'm going to cover that in a minute as to what that's for, especially the G there. But you can plug power into this one here. So they supplied a 3rd cable in the box, and I've plugged that into the spare port on the receiver, which happens to be S-Bus, but we're not using S-Bus, okay? It's just a way of getting power into the gyro, into a spare port, and then into this one here, which actually says receiver on it, and then that'll be enough to power it up. But again, make sure you do not plug power into either of these top 2 because you will damage the gyro. It says that in the instructions, so please don't do it. So now we've done that, again, I know it's not tied down, but if I power up the aircraft, you've got a light on the gyro. Give it a second to initialize. Here, that was the ESC. Now the gyro is initialized and it's gone red, which means the gyro is activated, as in it's got power, but the actual gyro mode is in off mode at the moment because we've got a red light. But let's see if our control surfaces work. Let's zoom back out and let's just check what works. So elevator is working up, down, left rudder is still left, right is still right, left aileron, that's working, right aileron, that's working. So that's the channels that are now passing through the gyro and going back to the servos. Servos are working, and of course the other channels we haven't touched should also still work. So flaps, absolutely fine, and I won't do the throttle because I'm in the workshop. I know that works as well. So what we've done there is we basically proved that we've got our wiring correct because the gyro is powered up, got a red light on, that's okay, it's not a warning light, it's not error light, and our control surfaces are still working. So okay, so now the gyro is plumbed into the aircraft, the next thing you want to do is the configuration. There's 2 different ways of doing this. Way number 1 is via some software which you download on your PC and use this USB adapter and use the wire provided to plug straightly in your PC into the gyro, and then you can load up the software and do the configuration that way, and that works absolutely fine. Or you can buy this programming card, which is basically all the software you need directly in this box, and you just plug this wire in this box directly into gyro and you do configuration that way, and that's what we're going to use in this video. Now this does add on to the cost. Now I made a point of saying the gyro is really cheap, £22, but what about this? This retails around 47, and I will just double check that and throw it up on the screen, and hopefully I'm right when that appears up here somewhere. So it's still considerably cheaper, and you only need 1 of these. So even when you first set up, you know, we're talking 60, 70 pounds, and again I'll clarify that in the top corner of the screen. It's still far cheaper than the Futaba gyro that I've been using, where the gyro alone is £150. And of course you only need 1. You can buy as many of these as you want and you still use the same one. So let's get this connected to our gyro, go through the system on here and make sure it's set up for our model. So just a quick note before we go ahead and plug in the programming card. If you're following along with me and you're trying to set this up for yourself and you're realizing that actually it's not working for you, it's probably because you're not using a Futaba receiver, which is fine. You can use any receiver. but you have to change the mode for the gyro. The gyro has to know what type of receiver, what make of receiver it's got plugged into it. So that's probably why things aren't working if you are indeed following along. So I'm going to plug this in first and show you that, so then you can go back and just check that your servos are working through the gyro. Okay, so to plug in the probing card, you need to use the supplied wire. Basically just a USB wire. One end into, there we go, into the card, and the opposite end will go into the gyro. Now, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't matter whether the gyro is on or off at this stage. I'm going to plug it in while it's off. Then you will need to power up to be able to get this to work, so let me do that. Okay, so that was the power up sequence. So as per normal, we've got the red light on, which means gyro is off, as in the gyro won't do anything right now if we were to fly this model. And we can see that we're wired in properly because the probing card has been powered up. So this is, in my mind, is much easier than using a PC to program these. Although I might cover that in a separate video, because you can of course take this down the flying field with you and change setup on the fly. Sorry about the pun. Okay, so some options here. We will go through all of these, but for right now, I just want to point out a couple to you. Okay, so the first one is number 6, receiver setup. So like I said, if your control surfaces aren't currently working, you probably want to go into receiver setup first. Choose up and down to select down to 6, and then enter is over here, and then that goes back. So hit enter. Receiver type is what you want to go into. And you see that I've got PPM selected, which is, PWM selected, which is what my receiver type is. So if your receiver type is wrong, then perhaps try one of these other settings first. Restart the model and then see if your servos start working through the gyro. Then in this same menu as well, if we go back from receiver type, you've got receiver brand / protocol. That's probably the one you want to check first, to be honest with you. I mean, you want to check both of these. You want to check both of these in fairness. But on the brand, if I go into that one, you can see that the default setting is Futaba, High-Tech, and W-Fly. And that's because they all use the same protocol when they're communicating. JR Spectrum, and the one further down there, which is Gruppner, and some other makes not heard of, use a different protocol. And then FR Sky, OpenTX, EdgeTX, so on and so forth, use a different protocol. So if you're using an FR Sky receiver, just to really labour the point here, nothing will work until you go ahead and change that setting. So you have to select it, hit enter, and then it will change it for you. But I'm on Futaba, so I'm hitting enter there, and that's now, it's telling it's using Futaba. Okay, so I'm going to escape out of that and just cover up a couple of other little bits for you before we go back to the transmitter and do further configuration. So from the top, wing type. You're probably familiar with that terminology because it's the same terminology you'll have in your transmitter, and that is defining, you know, whether you're a flying wing, a V-tail, or a standard setup. We've got a standard setup on this aircraft, so I'm happy with that section. Mount orientation. This is what I made a point of talking to you about earlier on. This is how the gyro is mounted. We've not mounted our gyro yet, but I know my gyro is going to go flat. It's always got to face forward. We haven't got a choice in that, but it's whether it's on the flat or whether it's on its side. So if it's on your side, mount orientation, coming here, change it. So flat inverted is upside down. Upright, you've got, there's another option there. Upright inverted. And that's all the options, which is fine. That covers the different angles basically. So I can't stress this enough. Make sure you mount it correctly in the aircraft. Otherwise your gyro is just going to do odd things when you're in the air. It's not going to know how to correct your model for you. So we're on flat, or we will be on flat when I stick it in. Come back out of there. Then you've got flight modes. And I covered these flight modes earlier on for you, but some configuration here you can do. So you can now select how the switch will work, a bit more detail on flight mode. You can do a user-defined one. You can configure the maximum angle for that trainer flight mode we spoke about as well. All pretty cool stuff. I'm going to leave all this at default right now. I've not really changed, I haven't changed anything actually from default, just to make it easier for you guys to follow along. But know these settings are in here. If you want more help on these, let me know and I'll do a separate video. Oh, let's come back. Sorry, escape. You've got gain set up in here. Again, I'm going to leave this at default, but go into there. Basic gain, lock gain, angle gain, level gain, so different
they correspond with the different modes we've got. Come down, some gyro configuration, gyro on off or gyro reverse. The gyro reverse is relevant. Let's have a look in here what we've got. So this is probably the thing you will have to change. So everything we've covered so far, as long as your receiver brand is correct, the other thing you may have to change is the direction the gyro goes. And I'm going to show you how to check this and test this once we've got our gyro activated. At the moment, no, it's not activated. But this basically, you know, if you're dropping the right wing, you want to make sure the aircraft corrects to the left. If it's correcting to the right, it means the gyro is going the wrong way for that control surface. That is basically it. So on and so forth for the other channels as well. So definitely want to check that before you do your first flight with the gyro on. That's why it's best to have the gyro on a switch, because if anything goes wrong, you can just turn it off from the transmitter and then re-enable and then turn it back on from the same switch. So let's come back out of that one. Come back again. Let's go down one more menu. Receiver setup we've been into. Output setup, let's have a look in there. Output set functions, you've got servo reverse, so you can reverse individual servos from here. Of course, you can do it from your transmitter as well. There is a difference from doing it from the gyro compared to transmitter. You've got sub trims from the gyro, that's pretty important. Obviously, everything is now passing through the gyro. So you want to make sure they're correct. It should be by default. And you've also got travel limits on the gyro as well. So these settings are probably familiar to you. You're probably not learning anything new here. It's the same settings you have on your transmitter. Again, I'm leaving all as default just so we can carry on. Level offset, hover offset. I'm not going to play any of those. These are the flight modes, the level flight mode, the hover flight mode. Some advanced settings have to go in there. Not sure what tick dead band is at the moment. Servo frequency, gain level, control. So that in first impressions, there's a lot of different stuff. Gyro digital filter. Let's have a quick look in there. Okay, interesting. Different digital frequencies. Again, I'm not an expert on this particular gyro. I've not seen those before, so we'll try and find out what they are for you. But lots of different configuration options. So the only thing I want you to check right now is the receiver type, because we've not actually got the gyro activated. So let's go back to our transmitter and connect this gyro to a switch on the transmitter. Okay guys, so before we go and set up the transmitter to activate the different modes on the gyro, I've just tweaked the wiring in here because I realised I made a mistake, so I'll make this really clear for you guys. When we first powered up the gyro, if you remember, we were missing this wire here. This is the wire that plugs in to the serial connection, and I plugged it into the spare slot on here, but that spare slot on my receiver was actually an S-bus slot, and I don't want to use that. So I've actually put it into slot 7. Now the manual says you can use slot 5, which is your gear slot, which is probably spare, and it would just work straight away on slot 5, but I put it in slot 7, and I'm going to show you on the transmitter how I've then connected the switch to that channel. So just make sure if you are using Futaba, you don't use this end slot, okay? I've just put my lights in there now for the rear lights on the aircraft, but slot 7 or slot 5, any of them really that are free, but not the end one, and you need to set that up on the transmitter. Let me show you that. Okay, so back onto the transmitter. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. So on the Futaba, we go into linkage menu, and then we go into function. And this is where we assign our different channel numbers from our receiver to different functions on the transmitter. So I want to go to page 2, and I'm now plugged into channel 7. Don't worry about the name. It happens to be auxiliary here, it can be anything, but it's a switch that's important. So if it's blank, just press the button, and then go and select the switch you want. You see I can change it here quite easily. SC is the one I'm going for on the top here, and then come out of that menu. And as soon as you've done that, there's no other configuration needed. This switch should now change the LED on the gyro to indicate it's going into different modes. So spin you back around and have a look at that. Okay, so back to the gyro, and I'll bring the transmitter into shot as well for you. Hopefully that'll stay in focus. Switch is up, so the gyro is red at the moment. Red is currently off, we know that because it's in the instructions. Switch in middle position, that's gyro on because it's blue. Again, back to the instructions. So now when we move the aircraft, you should see correction. And then I've got the flash in purple. Note there's 2 purple indicators, it can flash faster than that, and they indicate 2 different modes. But this mode means that we're going to go back to level. Okay, so it's kind of like our fail-safe mode, if you like, if you get into trouble. So you can see now that the switch is working, and that's pretty much all you need to do on the transmitter. Now the gyro supports 6 different flight modes. We saw them earlier. Now if you want to do that on a switch, you can do, but you have to use a secondary switch as well. So you have to use a 2-way switch to flick between the 2 different sets of 3 modes. I'm not going to cover that right now. It is possible. You have to configure a different switch to change what the initial switch is doing, and have to change the setup on the gyro so that you know you've got a 6-axis switch rather than a 3-axis switch. Okay, but for now, we've got something happening. Our gyro's all wired in. We've got lights changing. Let's get the gyro installed into the aircraft and also test that things are correcting the right way and we don't need to go and reverse some stuff. There's a gyro installed now in the aircraft. I've just made up a plate to go across this section here because there was nowhere to really put the gyro in this plane. I didn't really put it at the front because I want to be able to get to this data connection in case you need to change configuration. So I've just popped it there and made sure that the hatch still fits on, which it does. And I've double checked that I can still get the cable into the data so we can configure down the field, which I can do. Like so. So next thing to do is we'll unplug that, and we can turn on the aircraft and test to see whether the gyro is moving in the right directions. Okay, so a simple little test. What I want to do is just pick up the aircraft. I'm going to simulate one of the wings dropping, so simulate the right hand side going down. So I'd expect to get some left aileron. And I can just about see that I'm actually getting more right aileron, so that force a roll. So the ailerons need reversing. And the elevator, if I simulate nose dropping, I should get some up elevator, which I am. Rudder, again, is also opposite. So I need to reverse the ailerons and the rudder. Okay, so this plugged in, we'll just go down to gyro setup, gyro reverse. I'm going to reverse ailerons. There we go, reversed. Enter, go down to rudder, enter, press up to reverse, enter, escape, escape, escape all the way out of that. I'm just going to double check to make sure that's saved, which it has. Right, and then we'll repeat our test. Better. So move the nose to the right, should get some left rudder, which I am. Okay, so I'm happy now that that is actually working. All the control surfaces are going in the right direction. So the other thing we want to double check is how much gains we're getting. So we go into the config here, we can go into gain setup, basic gain. So on 50% for everything at the moment. Now that's probably a good place to start at. You could argue you could drop that down to 40%. I'm quite happy to try 50%. If you find it's overcorrecting too much or you're getting some juddering, then just you want to start dialing these down. Now you can run an extra cable on the gyro to another channel on your receiver so you can adjust the gains on a dial from your transmitter, but I'm not going to do that this time around for 2 reasons. First of all, well, one reason really, I've run out of ports on that particular receiver, so I'd have to unplug my lights to be able to do that. But we'll cover that in a future video. Okay, so we're ready to go flying. Gyro's in, it's behaving correctly, we've got everything configured on the transmitter. One final tip for you. If you are trying out a gyro for the first time, just do what I did and make sure you configure an off mode on the switch. So for that very first takeoff, you're flying as per normal. The gyro effectively is not being used. Obviously the servos are passing through the gyro, but it's not enabled. Get to a nice safe height and then turn the gyro on for the first time, and just make sure the aircraft just stays nice, straight and level. You should notice a smooth, improved flight. If anything's going to go wrong, that's when it'll go wrong, but at least you can turn the gyro back off, land the aircraft and work out what's wrong. Now do not configure the gyro so it's permanently on all the time, especially if you're new to gyros, because it's quite likely if you've got something wrong, you'll take off, aircraft won't behave properly and probably end up in a bag of bits.
We don't want to see that. So that's my final tip. Guys, I know this has been a longer video than normal, probably about an hour length I imagine, but we've covered quite a lot on this. You know, initial look at how to set up the gyro, all the different modes, and of course we've gone ahead and installed it, and we've done a quick test on it as well. There's more that this gyro can do, so if you want to find out about that, then just put a comment down below, chat out what you want to know about, and I'll do my best to answer it for you, or even create a follow-up video for you. Please like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you next time round.